We're now at day 2 trying to get the Titan Ridge installed. Everything was working perfectly when all we did was what was out of the box. But then we decided to get creative. And then we said, well, let's see what happens if we install one of the cards out of the retail box. Big mistake. You know, we always say keep it simple, and that's for a reason. When we tried to install the second card, that's when we started having problems. What kind of problems? Well, Windows went bonkers on us, one thing. And 2, trying to install the second card, system wouldn't boot. What we finally discovered why it wouldn't boot was the USB cable for signaling. Now, what's going on with that? Don't know, going to find out, but we're going to have to get the X399 system back in here and do some work with that. But in the meantime, we want to get this system back up and running, which is the TRX40 Designare. So what I'm going to do is show you, we had a problem where we need to go with more than one drive in the system. And here's what happened. Because Windows blew up on us, we had to pull another drive out, because when we tried to put the original 4 terabyte drive in, because it had been reformatted, it gets into an issue of MBR versus GPT. Windows will take a plain disk brand new out of the box and initialize it and set it. Okay, an MBR partition has to be 2 terabytes. Once Windows got up and running, there was a 2 terabyte space left there that I couldn't use because I needed to convert it to GPT. Now, the point of all this, you're going to have to buy something. The question is, what do you want to buy? You can buy a piece of software that you use one time that'll do all this, because Windows can convert a GPT from an MBR. Windows can convert an MBR to a GPT, but it cannot do it on the boot drive. So you can buy a piece of software that'll do that. You can download the software and it will show you what it'll do, but it won't do it until you pay for it. So you can buy a piece of software that you'll use one time, or you can get another drive. And since we happen to have the drive, that's what we're going to do. Now, what do I mean by that? When we installed that other drive, after monkeying around, we got back into Windows. Windows came up with an error. It had cratered. No big deal. I just go reformat. As Mattress Max said one time to us when he was a presenter at a Microsoft event for resellers, he said, you guys forget more than most people ever know. And that's always stuck in my mind, and I forgot that. Why is that relevant to this? Because I forgot about the 2 terabyte MBR, and the GPT can go over 2 terabytes. So what we need to do, because we're going to use that 4 terabyte drive for Instruments, is we need to have a boot drive of 2 terabyte. We need to have a 4 terabyte drive for Instruments. That 4 terabyte drive needs to be GPT, just that simple. So the way to solve this is we can put 4 drives on the motherboard. So we're going to have 2 drives on the motherboard. Well, that presented another problem, and that's what I'm getting ready to show you. The problem being, you can put 4 drives on, but when you take all the heat sinks off, 2 drives are really easy to use. The other 2 drives took me a little bit of work to figure out what was going on, and I'm going to show you as we use the Endoscope, OtoScope to take a look at that. The first drive goes in, no problem. But when you go to put in the second drive, there's a double screw that sits there. So you got this round piece that you can't get a wrench on, and you got a piece on top of it that has to come off so you can put the NVMe drive in. You put that top piece back on, then you can put the cover on. Well, that screw there that sits on top of that drive that has to come out, I couldn't figure out what size wrench that was. So long story short, I have, and I'm going to show you with this what it looks like. Now, there's not just one of those, there's 2 of those. So you can use 2 NVMe drives in here, no sweat. The primary, one under the long heat sink. All this magic and swapping around. About 22 hours later, here I am, part 2, and what I'm going to do is what we like to call keep it simple, and let's just go for what's bang for the buck. I know the software, we've used it before, I had forgotten about it, but I'll put up a link to it. Great piece of software. Used to, the programs would do this kind of stuff to the boot drive, but now they saw people were only doing that one thing and then dumping it, so I get where they're coming from. But for this is going to be for content creation. We need to keep the tools applicable to content creation, not to a computer geek. And that's what we're dealing with. I don't want to say I'm a geek, but I guess. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you this overhead with the OtoScope. And I'm going to have a little difficulty holding that down. So once I get it set, I will use 2 hands and show you the principle of what I was dealing with. Now, when we got to the second slot, there's a screw there that we have to take out. I've already told you about that. But what I have to do is I'm going to show you a wrench I had. No big deal with a wrench to put down motherboard standoffs, piece of cake. But what is a big deal is being able to see that. You got to be right down on it where you can see it, and that's what I'm going to show you. I thought it was one size wrench. I tried what I had didn't work. Anyway, let's take a look. Overhead. So as we look at the situation, what we're looking at, we've taken off this heatsink, and this is for number 2. Now, this is going to apply to one of the drives under this heatsink. We'll take it off. But what we need to do is look at that screw right there where I'm pointing. And I've got the OtoScope pointed to it, but because I don't have a clamp for it, I'm going to have to hold it with one hand, and I'm going to have to use another hand to show you the wrench that I had to put on it. And what you're going to see right here when the lights come on, you'll see right here on this screen. Okay, that's the standoff that we're looking at on the motherboard. Let me turn the screen the other way for a long view, and I will reorient the device. Oh wow, why didn't I do that sooner? Okay, that's the standoff. And if you'll notice, that standoff is a knurled standoff. Try to get a wrench on that. But what we need is that top nut off, because that top nut, if you'll notice that space in between there, that space is where that NVMe drive has to sit. Then this nut goes back on, then another screw goes on top that holds the heatsink down. So to get this off, we have a wrench that we've used before, socket for the Lee & Lee case. Lee & Lee used to include this with a case. Still have it, still works, but it's of a specific size. And I didn't realize motherboard standoffs can be so different. I know threads are different. Some use a coarse thread, some use a fine thread. But I'm going to show you what I found out with this. Trying to put this wrench on, it goes on, but it doesn't catch the threads. It's too big. I found out, near as I can tell, that's 5 millimeters. 5 millimeter won't cut it. So I said, okay, I've got a 4 millimeter socket. Let's try that. So here we go with a 4 millimeter socket. So I put that on, and I need to catch those threads. And man, I'm just spinning back and forth, and I'm thinking, well, I can't get this on or off, so that must be stripped. What the dickens is going on? Well, it's not a 4 millimeter. So I went and I had to get some sockets. Now I can order these online and get exactly what I need for less, but what I ended up doing was I found a kit at Lowe's that had exactly what I needed. Only one set. And I'll put a link up to the part. It's their cobalt stuff. It's over there with their tools. I needed a 4.5 millimeter. Wow. I've never needed a 4.5 millimeter till now. Let's take a look. So now, when we go down on that let me get that just a little bit lower. When we go onto that with a 4.5 millimeter, bingo. I can feel it. We can now loosen that. And that insert is loose and will come right off. Word of the wise, if you're going to use those 4 NVMe sockets on that motherboard, you're going to have a 4.5 millimeter socket. Yeah. 7.5 hours later. So this is about the Titan Ridge Thunderbolt card, but wow. So in a nutshell, we're going to now have a 2 terabyte boot drive, and the 4 terabyte drive is going to be right beside it, under the the black heat sink, and this set of tools with the extension on it is perfect. I've been building computers for a long time. I have never needed this till now. So, hope that helps. You know, we learn by doing. So you can take one more look at that and see what that looks like. So all I have to do is take that off. I got it loose. I guess that's one of those things that make you go, Well, I had a few other nice words. I was thinking, wow. You know, I was thinking, Gigabyte, you guys are nuts. What are y'all doing putting stripped nuts on there? And my first thought was, okay, now I know the number one reason why they put out a revision to the motherboard. Well, that wasn't it. Further investigation, further study, and I'm going to have to figure out and diagnose what's wrong with the Titan Ridge in the box retail. Same revision number, but there's a serial number on there with a code that shows this card that comes with this box with the motherboard is different, and you cannot use the retail card in this motherboard the way it's configured with the USB connection. Now, I mean, the system wouldn't even boot. And you're going to see some of that beforehand, and when you get to all that stuff, and I'm going to show you some of that. but I want you to see this because this is a big deal. So now that we've got this point set, we're going to go back, put our 2 terabyte drive in, then we'll put our 4 terabyte over. We'll be in business. And I'm going to show you this other heatsink right quick where the same problem occurs. You got to have that wrench for 2 of these. So right over here, this one, I'm going to pull this cover off. And yes, I'm using a magnetic screwdriver. If I could have ordered the parts and waited 24 hours, I would have probably ordered a set of Wiha, and I will also put up a link to those. Now I have access to all 4 drives. Now what was curious on this one, and that's what made me realize what was going on, when I pulled that screw out the last time, it stuck with that nut on there. And that's when I realized, aha. So that was an aha moment. And I've had this heatsink out, I don't know, half a dozen times. But the last time when it stuck, and when I pulled it out and that was on the bottom of it, that's when I got out the OtoScope and said, we need to see what that is, what's going on, and investigate that. And so, well, necessity is the mother of invention. So I'm going to lay that aside with that screw, because I've got a screw on both sides on that. I'm just going to leave it. And I want to show you right down here, we have right there. That's where that has that standoff on it. Now, by default, you can use right under here and put an NVMe drive, and you can put an NVMe drive right here. There's the screw. All I have to do is pull it out, that screw. Let's zoom in on that. So, NVMe drive number 1. Number 2, you have to be able to get that screw off. This one, if you want to call it number 3, that's a straight screw that comes right out, no problem. But over here, at the 2280 point, that is the screw that holds the heatsink down. So there's a screw on top of a screw. So you have to have that special wrench right here and right here. And I'll go down on that and show you what that looks like on the wrench. So I'm going to turn the OtoScope around and show you what that looks like. In fact, let's see if we can just take it in through here. There it is. That's a pretty good view of it. As you can see, and that was something else I noticed looking at these. I couldn't understand how the NVMe drive could be sitting in there at an angle. Well, it's not supposed to. You have to be able to take that screw off. And that's what you're looking at. Now, for future reference, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we have a clamp to hold this around, because I need some way to position it where I can't just lay something on it, but I need to be able to position it for it to lay and then be able to tilt it. Because the cable that's on it, even though it's flexible, it's a little too flexible to just lay it down. I'm glad it's as loose as it is. But as I get more experience using the OtoScope, Endoscope, I'll show you guys things that I think we need to know. And that was one of those gotchas that you really need to know. I guess the first thing we used the OtoScope for was checking the clearance of the RAM underneath the cooler. That was pretty cool. You know, I think being able to see this stuff is a really big deal. You know, I think being able to see the RAM was pretty cool. But I think the bigger deal was being able to see with the OtoScope, Endoscope, not only how that RAM sets, but being able to see these screws. And to know that you've got to have, and I'll tell you 100 times, a 4.5 millimeter wrench. That just, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. So we're going to get our video card out, we're going to set up our 2 drives, and we'll be in business. Cool. So off with the OtoScope. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to keep looking for a better endoscope, but so far this one works. And as I learn how to use it, it just paid for itself. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Something you guys want to see, I'll do it. So let's go overhead. We're going to pull the video card out and swap the drives. Instead of this computer being all Sabrent drives, we're going to have a 2 terabyte Seagate Firecuda. Now this is a PCI Express 4 2 terabyte drive. So my advice going forward is keep your boot drive to 2 terabyte, because if for some reason Windows craters, it's easy to recover. Part of the problem is the install of Windows Routine. When you download the Windows Media Creation Tool, the Windows Media Creation Tool is made to install from a clean drive, from a drive that hasn't been initialized. And you can reinstall from a drive that has been initialized, but you have to go through, delete the partitions, select it, because it'll start with an MBR, then it'll convert it, put it where it needs. But to keep it simple, if it craters, beyond cloning, imaging, and backup, I'm just going to advise everybody, keep your boot drive at 2 terabyte. I'd forgotten about all that, because we've been using NVMe drives now for probably a couple of years, and we've been using M.2 SSDs for at least 5 or 6 years. It's we haven't used a spinning drive for a boot drive in a very long time, so 7 years. So it's easy to forget something from 7 years ago. So anyway, Our 2 terabyte drive will be our boot drive. We've got Windows on this. Our 4 terabyte will go in the second slot now that we got that top screw off. And as we assemble it, we'll show you how that all goes back together. And that drive is going to be for instruments. So for content creation, 2 terabyte boot drive, and a 4 terabyte instrument drive. So native instruments, all that stuff from Kontakt. We're going to put those on that 4 terabyte drive. Now, I expect with what we have right now, we will probably have about a terabyte and a half. My expectation is anybody else doing this, a 2 terabyte ought to last you a while. But my expectation, because you don't want to buy instruments when you need them, you need to buy them when they're on sale. Believe me. And there are some deals periodically. For example, Kontakt, when it goes on sale, 50% off, that's the only way to buy it. So anyway, I want to have the space where I can grow, and most of those instruments, when they download, they've got this volume of information that they have had someplace to put it while it extracts all the information. So when you're dealing with 25 or 30 RAR files, and it's going through the process of uncompressing and doing the install, you need some place for that. So that's what we'll use that for. Keep things clean and neat, and it'll make it simpler and easier. Now, you can still lose one of those drives, so you still need a clone image and backup. But from the standpoint of maintenance down the road, 2 terabyte boot drive, 4 terabyte instrument drive, the other stuff accordingly will be in business. And we may eventually put in a couple of drives in these other slots on the motherboard. For example, a lot of you have asked about the Samsung drive. We're going to get one. We'll probably try it as a boot drive because when they first come out, they're only going to be 1 terabyte. We'd rather get our hands on a 2 terabyte, but the only drive you can buy right now is a 500 gig, and those you can order it, but they're not available. So the 1 terabyte, don't know when it's going to be available. And the 2 terabyte, they're talking like a couple of months, but who knows? They may wait till after the holidays, like in February. Get through everything in December. New stuff comes out in February. I'm just saying. Typically, historically, that's what they've always done. So that's kind of what I expect. It's kind of like the RTX 3080. With the price of video cards right now, it might still be a good idea to buy a 2080 Ti. It works. Remember when those first came out, they were a problem too. So it takes time to work out all the bugs. Everybody's excited. Everybody's in a hurry. But here we are. And here's another one of those problems. So let's get onto this, pull this card out, get this thing up and running. So going over here, we're going to get our video card out. We don't have to disconnect anything on the video card. We just need to pull it. Everything here on the power, we can keep that. We just need to pull the card out and move it aside so we can get to that drive. In a way, you got to look at the silver lining. I'm kind of glad this happened now. What if this had been in production and we had decided to put that second Titan Ridge card in there and this had happened? Because y'all know that have done instruments that do content creation. Man, that would be a real bummer. Right now, it's strictly operating system and drivers. So I'm really glad this happened now and not later, because we needed to know this. This goes back to, again, for the reason for building a foundation and growing. We got to that point, we had a problem, and we're dealing with it. So let's pull the video card out, set it aside. I'm really glad these clips right here that they don't lock. It was a good idea, but it's a real pain to deal with. And I've had 2 of these clips pop loose. I had to pop the clip back on. That's the clip on the back that locks that card in the PCI Express slot. If it pops off, pop it back on. I leave them open. I don't close them because I've had stuff in and out of here too many times. And on the X399, when you pop the card in, they pop up and lock. And then you had to reach in there with a screwdriver and pop that down. So this is better. So we got the video card aside. We'll pull this heatsink off. This is pretty simple and straightforward. And we're going to take that 2 terabyte drive and put it in there for the boot. And we're going to take that 4 terabyte drive and put it in there secondary. Now, I'm not going to put both drives in here right now. I'm going to do the boot drive, make sure all the drivers are correct the way I need them. I don't want to see any other drives but that one drive. Once I've got everything back up like I want running, then I'll come back and put that other drive in, because we want to keep it simple for the same reason that we had a problem and here's where we're at. Put everything back together and do it all at once to have a problem again. Layers, foundation. Pull that heatsink out, and boy, that stuff really sticks. And this is a good example for those of you that talk about pulling those labels off those drives, why I don't. As I said, things get moved around a lot. And when the other drive comes out, I want to put one of those in. Now, the drives, yes, have a label. I know when I'm looking at them in the BIOS, but I like to leave the labels on so when I'm pulling them out, I know what I'm looking at. Okay, so we'll pull that heatsink off. And that's going to go back in a box to protect it until we're ready to install it. That's what I appreciate with these Sabrent drives is the container they use. I really like this, the way this works. I got to tell you, the way the Seagate drives are, they need better packaging because you've got a piece of plastic, and with that plastic you've got an anti-static bag, which is nice, but I like these containers better. Okay, so we're going to pull that drive out. We've got a screw to take out. And remember, these are 2280, that's the dimension. 22 millimeters wide, 80 millimeters long, and that location that hooks the heatsink down, that's 110. And if you were to install a 110 millimeter NVMe drive in there, you're going to have the same issue. You've got that knurled fitting with a screw on top, and a screw goes on that. So you got to pull that screw out of that knurled fitting to get the drive in there. Another screw goes on that, and then the heatsink goes on. So you got to remember all that. Pull the drive out, put it back in its little home for now, till we get to the point we're ready to put it back in. That's a lot of work just to install a Titan Ridge card. It is what it is. So we'll take that and set it aside, and we will pull the Seagate out. Take a look at that. I've already had this drive in the machine. That's why I keep all these packages, because you don't ever know. There's not a whole lot to this. Pull that insert out of the top, and there's the drive in the anti-static bag. And let's install. Set the bag aside, and that will be our 2 terabyte boot drive. Put that down. Now it's important to note that the screws that come with the motherboard that are in the bag, those, I'll call them motherboard standoffs. They're actually standoffs for the NVMe drives. Those standoffs have that knurled fitting around them, but you can put them in with a screwdriver, with a Phillips screwdriver, a number 1 or a micro screwdriver. If it's got like what's on the motherboard, that insert in there, there's no extras of those. It's kind of awkward to deal with. Okay, anyway, we got the drive in. I just want to mention that. Okay, drive's in, secure. Now we'll put the heatsink on. And if you'll notice that heatsink, even though it's pretty thick, let's see if we can zoom in on that. There's an insert there where that screw goes. So let me put the screw to that and show you what that looks like. Now I like to use the micro screwdriver, but I also like to use a tip that'll hold the screw. So I'm using a number 1 bit in a regular screwdriver. So you can see, and there's just barely enough screw there sticking out. So we'll get that lined up, put that screw back in. So 2 terabyte, 4 terabytes going to go here. We're not going to put it in right now. We're going to get the video card back in, get this thing back up and running, because we want to make sure Windows is okay. I've already installed Windows on it, had it in there before, but I'm not taking anything for granted. Now I have the separate drive for the burner installed. I'm going to disconnect the data from that. I also had at that time internal spinning drive installed so I could pull the drivers off. Because of the issue with drive letters, I'm going to make sure that C drive will have a D drive, so I'll have to rearrange my drive letters. I want that to be D drive, keep it simple. So we got the video card installed. Now we'll put those screws back down. 1 and 2. Okay, video card's good. I'm going to disconnect the Blu-ray. I don't want to see it. Drivers have already been put in. I'm going to, and I don't remember what status we were at. I'm going to see if, let's see, I'll need to change drive letters. I've got the data drive installed in case I need to download a driver. So the, it won't hurt having the Blu-ray. I'm going to have to redo drive letter assignments anyway. So we've got the 2 terabyte in. We're going to boot. I've already installed it. I had it in here before, but it's been several hours. I've slept since then, as Ben would say. I miss all you guys. We did the live meeting, but I appreciate everybody being here for BuildOrBuy for the virtual meeting. So you guys are great. You're amazing. I love y'all all, and I appreciate you watching. So we've got the C drive in, video cards in. We've got the Blu-ray in, connected, and we have the data drive installed and connected. So now it's time to plug in the stuff. So we will put the keyboard and mouse on. Let's see, keyboard and mouse. That's video. And I'm not going where the DAC's at. I'll probably need those DACs later. One of the audio interfaces is USB, so keyboard's plugged in first, mouse plugged in second, video is plugged in. That's what happens when you're tired. Okay, and we can go ahead and plug in the network. I think Microsoft has done drivers. They did on the other drive, but we're getting ready to reformat the 4 terabyte again. I want that all one partition, so it's got to be GPT. So we have keyboard, mouse. We need power, video. Power's plugged in. Power supply was off. We will turn the power supply on, and we will energize and turn on the computer. Okay, system's up and running. See the lights on the video card. Fans are running. We're now going into Windows. Windows is up. First thing I'm going to do is just double check the computer, go into control panel, I want to look at the device manager, see what state we're at. Everything looks good. I'm going to double check the power options. Okay, AMD Ryzen balanced power plan, so that's all still there, which means I've installed the chipset drivers. What I'm doing is going through and checking, seeing where the drivers and everything are at. I remember on the 2 terabyte, I had Windows installed, it's there. We have the drivers, the chipset drivers installed, that's all there. The next thing, of course, will be to double check device manager and see if there's any issues there. There shouldn't be, but the one issue that might be with the video card because of the USB-C connection, so that's what I'm going to check, because I don't remember what state we were in. So control panel, device manager, everything looks good. I'm also going to rename the computer at some point to give it a name for the network, something that I know. I saw it when I was in device manager. What I need to do is look at the add remove programs and see what I got done. So control panel. Okay, I want to go to programs and features, and we've installed the AMD software. I had Aomi Partition Assistant. Okay, motherboard drivers. I don't have anything for the video. Okay, one other thing I want to do is I want to check my display. I don't remember what status we were at, so I'm going to do that because there's one thing I'm looking for. I want to make sure the driver's been installed, so I'll right click on the NVIDIA settings, open it, and down here on the bottom I'm going to click on system information, and what I'm looking for, the 2080 Ti. So Microsoft has installed a driver according to the video card, which is nice. PCI Express with 16 generation 3. For those of you that are thinking about the RTX 3080, the 70, and the 90, those are still generation 3 video cards, so I'm just saying. Put one in, take a look at it. Yes, you can hit the force it with that other tool from a PowerUp, and it'll tell you what it is. PCI Express 3. But the most important thing I wanted to know, right here, CUDA cores. The RTX 2080 Ti has 4352 CUDA cores. Now, that's pretty cool. The RTX 3080 has about double that, but when you consider what we came from, 4352 is pretty good. For content creation, that's a good place to be based on where we've been. And when they get the bugs out of the 3080, we'll take a look at one. Kind of like the Samsung 980 drives. When we get our hands on a 1 terabyte, we'll take a look at them. I'd rather have a 2 terabyte if I'm going to use it for a boot drive, but I'm just saying. So I've checked. I know I can save this out, which I usually do. I won't right now. I like to have the information on a system. But what I wanted to find out was where I'm at with my status on this particular drive. As the saying goes, there's been a lot of water under the bridge. So we've got the boot drive in, video cards in, systems booting fine. We don't have the NVMe card in, and we don't have the Titan Ridge Thunderbolt 3 card in. Those two are setting aside. What I'm trying to decide is if I want to put in that second drive and go ahead and get it set up so that it's formatted and running correctly. And that's kind of where my head's at. So I'll have to redo drive letter assignments, which is, you know, no big deal. But yeah, I want to get recovered from where I was. So I'm going to put in that second drive and get it set up. So 4 terabytes, that'll become drive D. We got to power down so we can get that done. Power, shut down. Okay, system is off. Turn off the power supply. Press the power button. That drains any power from the system. Now I'll remove the power supply cable. Those little things you just got to remember so you don't mess yourself up. Grounded, gloves, video unplugged. I can leave the other stuff. I pull the cable for the monitor because it's in the way of my getting to tools and stuff. I should use a longer cable, but I put a shorter cable on that, so I didn't have all that stuff hanging around. So anyway, I don't have to pull the video card to get this second drive in, so let's do that. The 2 terabyte drive now has a home, and it's going to stay. I hope. Wow. You know, for those of you that have never built a computer, don't let this scare you. This is the kind of stuff that happens every once in a while. What's important is having someone that can help you. And that's what we want you guys to take away from this. If there's a problem and we can help you, that's what we're here for. So I want to show you some of the things like the gotchas so that you don't have those problems. But if you do, what I've learned over the years is that when we have a computer problem, self-included, like they say, do what I say, not what I do. But most of us don't think logically when we're having a computer problem because look at the money we spent. We think of it emotionally. So if you can have someone like me that can help you because I have a more objective perspective, believe me, we'll solve it. We'll get through it. Don't sweat it. Just get in touch with us. And if you got a problem, we'll do everything we can to help you solve it. That's what this is all about. That packaging is done. We'll set that aside. And we will go back to our Sabrent 4 terabyte. Now right now, this drive is set up as an MBR. We can't have an NVR if we want one partition, because an NVR drive can only be 2 terabyte. So we're going to change this to a GPT. So that means we lose everything that's on this drive. So clone image backup, whatever. We drain the power. We're putting this in the second slot, and we've shown you what's involved in getting that top screw out. So let's go overhead. So that screw on top of a screw has got to come out. This is a really nice set of wrenches that we got. It's got an extension to it. Wow, it even goes back into the handle. I've got it extended all the way out. I like it. With a knurled fitting to twist. It's got a palm piece that'll rotate on the end, which I like. And then of course a set of bits in the top, and that just sits in there magnetically. I like that. So let's go in and take that out. Right on top. If I could hold the OtoScope and show you that and clamp it as that comes out, I would. But I've only got 2 hands. I need a 3rd hand to hold that. I will get a clamp to hold the OtoScope. So in the future, I can keep that set while we do this stuff. So that way you guys can see right on it what's going on. Times like this, almost like a microscope camera would help. But my concern, every microscope camera that I've looked at is fixed onto a mount, and there's no way to get it down where I need it to, or to turn it like I need to. And that's what I have with the flexibility of the OtoScope. So what I'm saying to you, and why I'm saying this now, if you guys come across a microscope or an OtoScope, an endoscope, that lets us look around and hold it where we need to with a clamp, I'd like to hear about it. We need 1080 resolution. Simple, right? What you'll find usually with an OtoScope is they're listed usually by megapixel, and it's like a 5 or 5.5 megapixel. And when I stumbled into this OtoScope, I thought, wow. And I've looked at hundreds of them. This is the second we've tried. Didn't like it at first, but the more I use it, the more I'm saying this is a necessity. So I put that out there for you. If you find something, let me know. Okay, so we have a screw on a screw that we're going to take out. So we'll pull that out. For that was giving us all this grief. I've only got 2 hands. We're going to do this anyway. Turn this puppy on. I got an idea. Now, why didn't someone suggest this sooner? Wow. I'm going to use some painter's tape. See if I can hold that down. That's not bad. Okay, I have that suspended with painter's tape. So you're looking at that fitting, and you can barely see the little knurled piece on it. When I bring this over here, right there is what you're looking at. That's a pretty good view. Right there where my finger's at to the right, where the light's at, right there's what you're looking at, right here. And you can see that little piece at the top, and that little area right there is where the memory's going to sit on top. So that's where we're at. Found my perfect clamp, painter's tape. Go figure. Okay, I'm going to have to move it so we can put the memory in. Wow, painter's tape. Who'd have thought? Okay, here's our drive. Let's get that installed. So a 2 terabyte boot, and this will now become the second drive. And we have to use the correct fitting. Yeah, we're still going to have to get a clamp. Anyway, that's what the screw looks like. And I'm holding that in my hand as good as I can. And you can see that knurled fitting on top. So the bottom of that goes on top of the NVMe drive, and that indentation on the top is the space for the heatsink. And the standoff has the same look that's on the board. Now, because the slot cover is off, you can see that knurled fitting right here in the camera, and you can see that top. So when that memory goes down on that, you can see how that sits right there. Just enough clearance. Without that, we got a problem. And that's the way that has to mount. Pretty slick, don't you think? If I can see better from here, I know you guys can see better from there. The tape's a good idea. It works temporarily, but I got to have a clamp. I need to be able to move it back and forth. So, pretty cool. So we're going to get that secured. That screw is not an easy piece to install. You almost need a pair of grippers on that to keep that up and hold it. I know what I need, but I don't have those. I have had them before, but I couldn't tell you where they're at to save my life. Okay, I got it started, secured. That was tedious. So my suggestion would be one of those, you push on them, that's got the little gripper on it. You need something like that where you can push and hold it, turn it, get it started, and then go to the wrench. I know what I'm looking for. I'm not sure what it's called. When I find one, I'll put a link up to it. It's like it's not forceps. I know that. Those would come in handy to hold that with. In fact, that's a thought. So anyway, we got that first nut secured. So I want to show you what that looks like right here. That first nut is now secure on top of that. That was a really, let's just say that's PITA to get that done. But if you're going to install on these other slots, you got to have it. Pretty handy. Right there is what we're looking at right there. So now the heat sink will go on top of that. Pretty cool, don't you think? Phew. Wow. 7.5 hours later. Well, we'll chalk this one up. This is going to be one for the books. My longest video shoot ever was 8 hours. Didn't think I'd ever do that again. This was 7.5. Went through 9 camera batteries. The batteries weren't fresh when I started, so I didn't think, it'd be very long. Swap out batteries once. Wow. I don't like putting cameras on electrical. I prefer cameras on batteries. Safer. And yes, everything's on a UPS, but still, it's just safer. Because when I do a remote shoot, cameras are also on batteries. Okay, heatsink is in position. And what we'll do is go into the BIOS and take a look and see how that looks. Okay, let's look at that again. So now we're looking at the top of the heatsink, and we've got a screw to put on that. And I'm using a magnetic screwdriver to hold on to that screw with the number 1 tip, and that's secured. I got to tell you, that's tricky. Of all the stuff we've messed with motherboards, that we now have to have a new set of screwdrivers, that's tricky. So the Endoscope, OtoScope came in handy. So we have 2 drives mounted. Now what I want to do is get this thing powered back up, look in the BIOS, make sure we see those 2 drives. I'm going to leave the other 2 drives set as they are. I can do drive lane assignments, but the crucial part here is done. Remember though, what we've got to do is get that 4 terabyte up, get it converted to GPT, so we have 1 partition, 4 terabytes, but it has to be GPT. Cannot be MBR. All that because of a Gigabyte Titan Ridge card that blew the operating system up. Wow. It is what it is. We learn by doing. We always say check all your ports, but usually it's the ports, everything externally around. Checking internal ports, it's kind of a given. Check those SATA ports, make sure they work. But to have to check your NVMe drives, I will say one thing that we never mentioned on the X399. We had it in notes, but we never had it in video. And one of you guys told us about it. Of the slots on the X399, 2 motherboards we used, both Gigabyte. One user commented, said he wanted to put some M.2 drives in those other slots. Well, guess what? Those 4 slots take NVMe drives. Those 4 slots will not take M.2. You could put an M.2, I believe it was the second slot he tried to put an M.2. It would only take an NVMe drive. Nowhere in the documentation about that. So I'm kind of curious about this. In fact, what we might do, we have 2 more slots on here. We have one system that we need to bring down, actually 2 systems we need to bring down. The 8350 that's running the 990 FX chipset, we need to pull those drives out. Those drives are M.2 drives. I'll do that. We'll make another video about it, and we'll see if it'll work. There may be particulars about the slot configuration, but we're only going to try it on this. We're not going to try it on the X399. We got to keep going forward because there's a whole bunch of stuff we still got to do even with this. So to reiterate, 2 terabyte boot drive, 4 terabyte instrument drive. Video cards installed, Blu-ray still connected, and the internal spinning drive is connected. So we're going to go into the BIOS, see what we see. Boot the machine, go into Windows, fix that drive. All this is about getting that drive fixed so we can use it. And then once we're back on level playing ground, then we'll get our driver back in for the Titan Ridge card, the one that comes with the motherboard. I'm not messing with the other one on this machine. That's a lost cause until I can get some more information to find out about what's going on. I will contact Gigabyte about this, and I'm also going to put it in the Gigabyte forums. There's some great guys up there. There's one gentleman in particular I've been talking to that's helped like 1,000 people. I'll ask him. He has a TRX40 because what we need is another guinea pig. You saw what happened with this, and we need more information. Okay, now in the BIOS remembers the last we were in. I've taken it to the simple BIOS because I want to show you here on the bottom left-hand corner. The boot sequence shows these 3 drives. We have to change that order. So to do that, over here on the right, we're going to go to the advanced mode. Once we're in advanced mode, go over here to boot. And right now the boot option shows the first drive being Seagate. And we're going to change that. What we want to do is to have the boot order. Remember, and this is different with different motherboards, but the way it works right now on Gigabyte is it remembers the last drive it saw. I believe the Asus boards remembers the first drive it saw. What do I mean by that? On Gigabyte, the last drive it saw would have been probably the spinning drive, and that's why it's bringing it up first. So we're going to go over here and change the options so that that drive is going to be according to the order we want. Now with an Asus board, it remembers the first drive, so it always sees that first drive unless they've changed that default behavior. So different motherboards do different things. You just have to be aware of how that works. So we're going to change that, and the first one we've already got it listed. So we've changed the first drive to the Seagate, and it originally had the Western Digital drive. So the Seagate 520, which is a 2 terabyte drive, we have set for the boot. The second drive, not that it matters, but we've set the Sabrent Rocket Q4, but that will not be a bootable drive. And the third drive it would try to boot from would be that spinning drive. That's an internal drive, a data drive. It also is not bootable. The most logical next place it would go is if it goes through this tree of 4. And remember, as we add drives, for example, once we put the NVMe card in here, it would see all 4 of those drives and add those to the list of boot. So if it can't boot from number 1 until it finds one that will boot in that order, and if I can't boot from number 1, I'll go to number 2. If I can't boot from number 2, I'll go to 3, so forth, until it gets one that will boot, and it'll boot from that drive. So you need to keep that in mind when you're setting this up. So I just wanted to show you that. This wasn't meant to be a tour of the BIOS, but you need to know this at this point, solving problems. So we've got the boot drive, number 1. Second and third one don't matter, but the fourth one does, would be to boot from the Blu-ray. And if we had memory installed, because we're doing the Windows Media Creation, it would boot from that disk. Just need to be aware of that. So I'm good with the boot order. All I need to do now is F10. But while I'm here, I'll check settings. I'm going to go over here to I/O ports, and I'm just looking. Yeah, we've changed our slots. Slot number 2 for the NVMe card is 4x4, and the other slot, we set that to 4x4. We didn't have to. So we have our boot order set. So all we need to do now is press F10 and save. Let's reboot. System reboots once we get back into Windows. Then we're going to set these partitions up so that we see that second drive not as an MBR but as a GPT. One big drive. Okay, we've got post coming up. Now once the computer's back up, we're going to go into disk management and do all this. Remember, it's about what have I got, what do I need to do to get to where I want to be, and what tools do I have to get that I'm going to use on a regular basis. The one absolute tool you're going to have is that 4.5 millimeter wrench, socket wrench. So keep that in mind. As far as any other software, I'm trying to avoid anything extemporaneous. I'm trying to work with what we have, because as content creation, you know, there's a lot of tools that we have to work with, and I'm trying to keep it simple. Okay, Windows is up. We'll go to Control Panel. Let's go to Administrative Tools, Computer Management, Disk Management. Okay, we see 4 different devices. It sees the internal drive, disk 0. Disk 1 would be the C drive, which is fine. Disk 2 is a G drive, which is not fine. And then the CD-ROM, which is, and I left the disk in there to give it a label so you could see, that's just the Blu-ray drive. So the drive we're going to monkey with is this one. Now, I'm going to delete the volume that's on the 4 terabyte drive, because if you notice, this drive right now, and let's see the easiest way to see that. Okay, I need to show you the difference in MBR and GPT. I'll go to Control Panel. There's a couple of ways to do this. We'll go to Device Manager. Let's go to Disk Drives. We'll look at the Sabrent drive. We'll go to Volumes. We'll say Populate. That drive is an MBR drive. Okay, we're going to see if we can do this with another tool, because we need to convert that to a GPT. And once we convert it to GPT, then we're in business. So I have the Mini Tool Partition Wizard installed, and looking at that drive, which it sees as the data drive, disk 1, disk 2, disk 3. Okay, the disk 3. This is one of the biggest reasons why we say don't have a lot of stuff installed, so while you're working with it, because it's easy to get confused and mess up the wrong drive. What we're going after is that Sabrent 4 terabyte drive. We want to be sure that we're formatting the correct drive. We don't want to get confused with drive letters. So the Sabrent drive would be disk 3. I click on that drive. I'll right click, and right there is what I want. Convert. So we're going to convert MBR to GPT, and then that's on the Sabrent Q4. So we'll click on the drive, right click, convert MBR to GPT. Now, over here on the bottom left, it says apply. What's nice, any of these programs, and this program's free, we'll put a link up to it. I think we've talked about it before. This will let us do this on the fly. Tools like this, if they'll let me do what I want, then I'll go back and buy them. But if they make me buy them before I can do it, I move on. I don't mean to be picky. I'm just, I'm trying to get something done. Once I get it done, then you got a customer. I'm just saying. So anyway, down here in the bottom left, it says apply. We need to apply it, because all we've done is looked and said this is what I want to do, but we haven't actually done it yet. It's that little safety net. So we're going to go apply changes, apply pending changes. Note, we strongly recommend you close all other applications before you apply the pending changes. I hear you and I'm with you on that. Let's do this. So we're going to say yes, and it's doing its thing. Applied all pending changes successfully. Now let's go look at our results, see what we've got. Okay, and the Sabrent is now GPT. Okay, because it's GPT, we should be able to change it and do what we want. So now what we want to do, we're going to delete all partitions. We ought to have a separate video on this, but this all pertains to the Titan Ridge card. And I'm showing you we got into a problem because we tried to install the retail card tinkering, so we're trying to get back. And the purpose of all this is we have a 2 terabyte boot drive. We have a 4 terabyte, we'll call it the secondary drive, which is going to end up with a drive letter of D for our instruments. So we're going to delete all partitions on the Sabrent drive. Are you sure that you want to delete all partitions on disk number 3? Disk number 3 is the Sabrent drive. Yes, that's what we want to do. Done. Now, that drive shows up now. If you'll notice, GPT, MBR, GPT. Now that we have one drive, we're going to set it for one partition, we're ready for our instruments. Pretty simple, straightforward. The mini tool is worth what it costs, which it was free. So we're going to right click. We could do this from within Windows, but while we're here, we'll just use this application. Right click, create, and we want the full space, the largest we can go with. It'll be 4 terabyte, which is 3726. Can't go any bigger. So we're going to give it a label, and we're going to call that Instruments. In fact, we're going to call it 4 terabyte Instruments. And I'm going to go ahead and put the date on there that I did it, which happens to be 9/26/20. Unallocated space, partition size, 3.64 terabytes, unallocated space. So a 4 terabyte drive comes out to about 3.5 terabytes of space. It is what it is. We'll say OK. And right here it shows what it's going to be when we're finished. And we're going to click Apply. Apply pending changes. We strongly recommend you close all other applications before you apply the pending changes. Yes. And as it goes through the process, updates, all pending changes applied successfully. Well, we now have a 4 terabyte drive. Now it's been given a drive letter of F. Now that we've got the drive set, let's go look at it through Windows Explorer, see how it looks. The drive letters are not going to be the way we want them. So from this point, we can close this application. From this point, after we've looked at it with Explorer, then we're going to go in back to Windows Disk Management, and we're going to change the drive letter assignments. Simple. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to close this application, quit the program, yes, and we'll do a Windows flag E. Click on this PC. There's our drives. Our C drive, our Blu-ray, our 4 terabyte instrument drive, and the internal data drive. Now here's an interesting point we have to decide, and it's a choice that everybody has to make. You have to think in your mind how you want that listed. For example, you have a C drive, but you want to have, what we do is a spinning drive that has the stuff that we download on it. Okay, if that's the D drive, pretty simple. What's most important? Those instruments? Well, then I want those instruments to be on D drive. If that's the case, then we need to move that data drive where we download stuff to the next drive letter in the tree. So we would have C drive, D drive instruments, and then E drive for downloads. Something you have to think about ahead of time. So let's go into disk management and set our letters. Personally, I think it helps when you understand the reasoning behind something, not just that it's done. It's prioritization. Like prioritizing what goes in the computer, I prioritize the drive letters. What's most important? Again, content creation, that's what we're after. So our priority is not downloads for this computer. Our priority are instruments. So C drive, boot drive, D drive, instruments, internal spinning drive, downloads, C, D, E. The other drives, they don't really matter. But these three, they do matter. So at least now you kind of know where my head's at and why I do what I do. I think everything, once you understand the process. Now you might decide downloads are more important, but for me, from my perspective, for what I'm going to do, those instruments are much more important. Those instruments, those are expensive. Those are quite a commodity. Those are quite tedious to get installed. I mean, it's going to take me days to get those all configured. If I had to download them again, all I've got to do is copy them over. But we might do a separate video on that. We'll see if you guys are interested. So what we want to do now is we're going to go back into the control panel to Windows Disk Management, and we're going to set our drive letters. Control panel, Administrative Tools, Computer Management, and Disk Management. And we're going to change our drive letter assignments. C drive is good. That internal data drive is okay. The instruments, that's not good. So we're going to have to take the letter away from the CD-ROM. So we're going to change drive letter. We need that. Now, what do we want to put it to? Something that's not being used for the time being. So we're going to remove the D. Some of the programs that rely on that drive letter may not run correctly. Are you sure you want to remove this drive letter? Yes. So we remove that drive letter. We'll just let it sit there. We'll come back. And we're going to go to the instrument drive, right-click on it, and we're going to say change drive letter path. And we're going to change that to drive letter D. That now becomes drive number 2. Some programs that rely on drive letters might not run correctly. Do you want to continue? Yes. So that's now drive letter D. So we have a C drive, we have a D drive, and the internal drive is now E. I'm good with that. CDE. So we could now give this drive something further down the tree. I like to keep the drive letters consecutive. In other words, I don't like to have one out. So I look at how many drives I might be adding so that, you know, whatever the order is. The reason I'm saying this is because wherever the install routine is off of the Blu-ray, more than likely you will not have to have that called up again from the same drive letter to do an uninstall. So I'm just putting that out there. So whatever drive letter I put that at, if I want to keep everything consecutive, this would be the next letter. However, there will also be another drive that will not be tied to for the removable rack, actually 2. For them to be assigned a drive letter, I'm going to skip 2 spaces, and I will put the Blu-ray one below that. So I've got a CD and E. I'll skip 2, C, D, E, F, G, H. So I could go to H for the Blu-ray. I'll give it an H for heck yeah. So we'll give it an H for okay. You know where I'm coming from. So we'll right-click on the Blu-ray, change the drive letter. We will add it, and we're going to go for the letter H. We'll say OK, and that's now letter H. So we can close this, select and choose what happens to this disk. I'm going to say it sees the Gigabyte disk. For now, we'll just say, well, we'll take no action right now. I forgot that disk was in there. So it's Gigabyte. That's why the label's there, because it sees the disk that's in it. I left that in there so we would remember and make note of that. Okay, so let's close this application, and let's now go to the Windows Explorer, Windows Flag E, click on this PC. We have our C drive, we have our D drive, which is the 4 terabyte instruments. I've given it a label. So we're going to give C drive a name. We'll rename it, and we're going to call it 2 terabyte Sabrent boot. Now, a little dialog box is going to pop up, and we're going to have to say OK for administrative permission. We will say OK. You will need to provide administrator permission. Continue. Done. 2 terabyte Sabrent boot, a 4 terabyte instrument, and the day we did it. So we have a C drive, a D drive. We have an internal data drive, which is now E. So what I need to do now is any application that downloads, remind it that it's going to go to drive letter E. So in the browser, whatever browser I'm using, change it to drive letter E. I don't want anything downloading to C, and I really don't want anything downloading to D. So we'll download everything to E. E for effort. Just one of those mental notes. I hope you guys are finding this useful, and I hope you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and the reason I'm doing it. Because my goal is not that you do the same thing, but that you understand the process so that whatever you decide, you choose a method that's best for you. And that's what this is all about. It's about options. So the internal drive. Now originally I had a shortcut up here, and it goes back to it. It remembers my shortcut. Slick. Okay. So I've got my 4 drives set. Okay, now I'll show you how to set those shortcuts in Chrome and Firefox on where you want your downloads to go. If you're like me and you don't want anything else on C, since that's an NVMe drive, we're going to send that stuff to a spinning drive. So I'll show you that. So the first thing we'll do is bring up our Chrome browser. We'll go here to the top right, click. We don't want downloads. What we want are settings. And what we're looking for, advanced. We can get to it either way. Click on advanced. Right here, downloads. We want that download to change from the C drive, and I'm going to say right here, and that path, because of my shortcut, is the E drive. So I'm going to say select folder. So my downloads are now going to go to E users, public downloads. Pretty simple. Let's go do the same thing with the other browser. So I can save my changes. So all I need to do is just close that, and it's set. So let's bring up the second browser. We'll go to Firefox, and again, top right hand corner, click on the 3 bars. We are looking for Options, Download, Save Files to, and we're going to say same thing. Because I have a shortcut over here, I'll click on Public, and if I click up here, it shows the drive path. Public Downloads. If I click up here on this again, it shows the path. So I need to click on Select Folder, and there's my path. So downloads now will save to that drive, eDrive Users Public Downloads. Simple. I would have to go do the same thing for any other browser I might choose to use, but I've shown you on these two. Hope that helps. So now that that's set, I can close that. Next time I call up the browser, it'll remember what I'm doing. So let's see where we're at. We've got our drives in, and all this started because we tried to put in the second Titan Ridge card. So where we're at, we've got the video card installed, we've got the primary C drive, we've got the secondary drive, which is the 4 terabyte set to a GPT. What a hassle. And the tool we used was the Mini Tools Partition Wizard. We'll put up a link to it. It's free, doesn't cost anything. So something to keep in mind. So the next step to do is to go ahead and probably put the Titan Ridge card in here because we know it's the most persnickety. Get it connected, but we're only using the one that came with the board. Once that's connected, then we'll put in the NVMe drive. We'll be back to where we started, round robin. So, okay, enough tinkering. We need to get the Titan Ridge card installed. And this time we'll install the Titan Ridge before we get the NVMe card installed, considering we have that all sorted out. And we've also got some, we've got a heatsink we still need to put back on, so powering down. Okay, going overhead. Now we've got to get this heatsink put on, so first thing I'm going to do is suit up. Got to get my gloves on. Now we have to remember these other 2 NVMe drives that we can put in this machine. One can be put in without the wrench, one cannot. One will have to have that special 4.5 millimeter before it'll work. So before I start handling cards, I'm grounded, power's off, I turn off the power supply, hit the power button one more time to make sure everything is drained. Drained, good. Now we can remove the power. Power supply is off. I'll disconnect the monitor just in case. Now, I'm free to work. Let's go overhead. So, with video cards in, primary drives installed, secondary drive, 2 terabyte, 4 terabyte. So the first thing we're going to do is this 8-lane slot. I want to get this cover put back on because we're not going to be needing to put either one of these NVMe drives in. We can install the primary one on this side. The only way to install the secondary one is you've got to have that special wrench to get that top off. So we're going to put that heatsink back on, deal with that another day. But at least we know, and you do too. Okay, that's installed. So cover's on. We're ready now to put this in. This all started with Titan Ridge. It's a lot of trouble to get that card in a machine. For those of you that say it's too much trouble, well, as long as you stick with what's in the box, you won't have any trouble. We had a non-standard install. When we started tinkering, we had trouble. So we'll get this card back in. In fact, before we do, let's get our cables plugged in. Get that USB out of the way, USB 3. We will need our bottom cable, which is Thunderbolt. So first things first, we'll do our Thunderbolt connection on the bottom. Then we'll plug in our USB 2 header. And that's what started all this, was the USB 2 header when it wouldn't work on the other card. Have no idea why. This, of course, is keyed. Both of them are keyed. We'll get all our internal connections done. We'll do our power taps. First power tap. Everything's keyed, so you can't mess it up. Second power tap. All that's plugged in. Now all we need to do is get the card in the slot. And we're in the slot, so we'll get it secured using a number 2 tip. Okay, card's installed. Everything's connected. We're going to boot Windows. We're going to go check the BIOS. There'll be 2 settings that we didn't see that should come back. We just want to make sure everything's set. And then when we get into Windows, we're going to use the driver on the CD. Remember, we need to use the CD because that's what shipped. If there's a newer driver, my concern is, based on the experience with the other Titan Ridge card, a user bricked one of those cards by updating the firmware in it. And based on what we had happen with USB, I'm not willing to mess with the driver, download it if it's newer. We're going to use what's on the CD. Keep it simple, because it worked before, so we had device connectivity. That's what mattered. So video card is in, Titan Ridge is installed. All the connections are set. For a little bit of cable management, we've got everything away from the video card, so nothing will touch here. We use twist ties, and if you want to go back in later with zip ties when you're finished, that's fine. But until we get through, twist ties. The USB cable is still loose. We'll manage that later. This particular cable that goes to the other USB 3 header, we need a longer cable because this goes to this drive. What we're going to probably do is take these two drives and swap them, so that way this drive will be in the bottom. By being in the bottom, it'll give us a longer cable, so we'll have a little bit better cable management. But that's not the issue right now. The issue is this card right here. We want to get this up and running. So the next thing we need to do, we've got keyboard, mouse, network. We have our, and I'm going from the top down. We have HDMI video connected. Power is plugged in. I've turned on the power supply. Now we're ready to energize the power. And then when we get the computer up, we'll go into the BIOS. Computer boots. I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that the computer wouldn't boot with the other Titan Ridge card when the USB cable was plugged in. Makes no sense. I understand, but I don't. Does that make sense? I know enough to know that I need to know more. But this system needs to get up and running for production, so it will only have one Thunderbolt card in here. And it'll be the Titan Ridge that came with the board. Post. And we are into the system. And we're into the BIOS. Let's see. First things first, we need to go to Settings, I/O ports. Alright, PCI Express Thunderbolt support is enabled. And Thunderbolt configuration also enabled. So we're pretty much good to go. I just wanted to double check, put the card in, everything comes back up by default, nothing to do. We're going to Windows now and install the driver. Now, when we go back to install the driver, remember, what we couldn't see before without the card installed, now that the card is being seen, we'll be able to install the driver. It'll show up, which is kind of curious with the way the install routine works up. So, into Windows we go. So we're going to double check, go to System Info. Everybody looks good there. We'll go to Boot. Everybody looks good there. Just want to double check. And we will go ahead and do an F10. That wasn't F10. Boot. Well, I hit F11. Okay. Didn't realize that would do that. I saw the keyboard shortcut. Okay, so we'll hit F10. Save and exit configuration. Yes. Now we reboot. And once we're back up and running, then we'll go into Windows, go back to our disk, get installed. You know, it's interesting. If we hadn't tried that Titan Ridge card, we would not have been trying to put in a second NVMe drive. If we hadn't been trying to put in a second NVMe drive, we would have known we needed this wrench. It's funny how things work out. Really interesting. So I'm glad to know about this. I'm also glad to know that I can't get this installed, but it sure has me baffled. We'll figure it out. Now, why it trashed Windows, I don't know, but makes you a little gun shy. Okay, setting up device, love this. Shows it here on the bottom right, setting up the device. Goes by so quickly you don't get a chance to really see it. Base system device. Boy, having BIOS support makes this just so much easier, where it automatically recognizes. Base device is ready, and that's the Thunderbolt card. I'm waiting to see if we have another menu that'll pop up. We'll click on it. You see the way the driver used to load, it was down here. Now it's a separate application. Anyway, I want to go to Device Manager and take a look right quick. So, Control Panel, Device Manager. Yes, there's a lot of ways to get to it. Right there's the base system device showing up. So that's going to get fixed once we get the driver installed. Same thing happened with the video card, looking at that USB-C port. Okay, so let's bring up Windows Flag E. Let's go to this PC. And we've got the Gigabyte driver disk in there. We'll do autoplay. Run the EXE. We're going to say yes. Well, that's running for the moment. I'll take my strap off. Take the gloves off. Only wear them when I need them, when I go inside. Little manual dexterity. Oh, shoot. Not good. We have an error. Your device ran into a problem. We have a stopcode error. GDRv2.sys. Wow. Right there. Your device ran into a problem, needs to restart. Well, let's see what happens with this one. May have to do a little bit of research. Didn't have that happen the first time. Which means the GDRv2 would be the video adapter. So I need to update the driver for the video adapter. Wow. Okay. I can do that. which means I should have done that, which is what I did the first time. I didn't do it this time. I let Microsoft's driver put it in. So good to know, which means we may have to pull the card out because that problem's going to happen again. Having a problem is one thing, knowing how to solve it is something else. So let's see if we can go straight to the driver, which is on the other internal drive. Let's see if we can do this without having to pull the card. It'll be a race. Windows flag E, this PC. Let's go to the internal data drive, which is under public, downloads, incoming, drivers, and we need that driver. So the chipset's fine, so we'll install that video driver, 452. Let's see if it'll let us. NVIDIA. And it's installing the C because I didn't take time to tell it not to. Sometimes that happens. So I'll have to go remove that later, knowing that I just let that install on C. Habit. I should have told it E. But anyway, this is the quickest way to get the driver installed. And this also shows that you can't trust just the video driver that you get from Microsoft. You got to have the latest driver from NVIDIA to avoid this. Agree and continue. We're going to do a custom install because I want to see what's going on. And let's see what we're getting. Graphics driver, the HD audio driver, the NVIDIA driver, the PhysX, the USB-C. Yes. And this will be a clean install, so we're just going to go ahead and click on Next. I just wanted to double check and see what we were getting. So we'll click on Next, doing our thing. Yeah, a GeForce RTX 3080. Not until they get the bugs worked out. So this also goes to prove the point of doing the drivers. Once the operating system is installed, then install the motherboard drivers, then install the video drivers. And yeah, it's hitting the drivers, blanking the screen. Okay, it'll do that 3 or 4 times. It's about halfway through, which it did. Video driver takes, so the error that you saw was the video driver, and I forgot, because I've done this so many times, step it up. We should be good. Let's take a look. All right, the USB-C driver, that could have been the driver we saw in Device Manager that had an error. Didn't get a chance to look because I forgot, didn't have the video driver in. So that's where that error was for that USB-C, which is on the 2080. Now, going forward, the 3080, they've taken that USB-C port off. What was the USB-C port for? Well, if you're going to use one of those virtual reality headsets, but those kind of were kind of like 3D from the 50s. It was a big deal. Now it's not a big deal. It'll probably be a big deal later. But anyway, that port's removed from the 3080s. So we will create a shortcut, restart. Let's do that. Let's reboot. Windows is restarting. It's one thing, again, to have a problem. Can't drive that home enough. It's one thing to have a problem. It's another thing to know how to fix it. So having a background with doing computer IT work and been building computers for a very long time, that's why. Keep it simple. Build a foundation. But as the man said, sometimes we forget. So we've been reminded, of which I am thankful and grateful, because I'm hoping the problems that we've had with this that you will not have. But if you do, you know where to find us. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. So one video card, one Titan Ridge Thunderbolt 3 card, second slot, and we'll put the NVMe card in. I don't expect to have any other trouble with any of the other NVMe cards, but I didn't expect to have trouble with this Titan Ridge card either. That's spinning in my mind because I'm going back and forth trying to figure out what's going on. We'll get to an answer. We'll get to a resolution. We'll solve it. Okay, Windows is rebooting. Windows is coming back up. Now, this time we'll go back again and see if we can install the drivers. So if you ask, why do I need to install the drivers beyond what Microsoft does? So that doesn't happen. That blue screen. Blue screens are a bummer. Blue screens are like this. It's always like Abbott and Costello, who's on first? Okay, Windows is back up. Let's go to the disk. Third time's a charm, as they say. Windows flag E, this PC. Right-click on the Blu-ray drive. We will open autoplay. Run the EXE. Yes. And if you get tired of seeing that, you can disable that feature from within the control panel. It's supposed to be a security feature. Now, while that's trying to load, it takes a couple of minutes for it to get all that stuff up there. While that's trying to load, anything else we need to cover? If you guys have any questions about what's going on, or if there's anything we didn't make clear, because right now we recorded 7.5 hours that you're not going to see, and today we're at 3 hours. So that gives you some idea how long it's taken to fix this. You know, again, it's one thing to have a problem, it's another to know how to solve it. That's what we're here to help you solve, so that you won't have problems. For those of you that have never built a computer, if you'll follow the steps 1, 2, 3, you will not have these problems. But because we've done some tinkering, and tinkering is how we learn. You know, like they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But when it does, figure it out and get her done. Okay, drivers. Now we're after only one driver. Everything has a check mark removed. We'll scroll through the list. It has check marks beside the stuff that we've already installed. So we have the drivers, shows in red, AMD chipset, Realtek USB, Intel network software, Intel Wi-Fi, Intel Bluetooth, and right there, Thunderbolt. Now the DTS Digital Theater sound driver is already installed, but the Thunderbolt. I'll make note of this now. There are 2 folders on the disk if we looked at it, which we did earlier. I'm not sure you'll see that, but there's 2 folders on the disk for Thunderbolt. One is just Thunderbolt software, and the second one is this for DCH. I find it curious, well, I just say I find it curious that there's 2 separate folders. I'm not sure what the difference is. I'll figure it out. But what I want to make note of, when we originally installed just the drivers for the motherboard, without the card being in, those drivers didn't show up. Now that the card's installed, the drivers show up because it sees it. Pretty smart, pretty slick, pretty cool. Just want to make that clear. So that's the only thing we need to install. So we're going to say install. That is about, not very much, 2.75 megabytes. And it shows the version. We're version 1.41.648.4. I'm going to do a print screen, which is Windows flag print screen key, because I want to keep that information. I want to compare it, and I want to know that later. So install. And away we go. THB underscore host controller extension. It's going by too fast for me to read it. I'll close that so we don't have anything else extemporaneous to look at. Now when this is finished, originally the driver used to show up down here with notifications, but now it shows up as a separate application. I find it curious how they made that change when they updated the driver. And it's been quite some time since we looked at the X399 with the Titan Ridge. Believe you me, I'm going to go back and take another look. And I will probably use the X399 to do what we will call a tinkering install, because for whatever reason it won't work with the TRX40. That's really got me wondering. Here we go, Thunderbolt. Okay, the Thunderbolt Control Center right here in the bottom right hand corner. What we're going to do, it says just got installed, launch. Okay, I want to pin that to the start menu, and then I'll go launch it. I want to make it easy to find. So I'm going to close this down. We're through with those drivers for now. So I'll click over here on the left, start, and right there at the top, Thunderbolt. And I will have recently added Thunderbolt Control Center, GeForce Experience, and of course the other stuff I've been using. So I'm going to click on Thunderbolt Control Center, and what I will get is that. So we're back to where we were when we started with the standard install. Took a long time to get back to that. Once we plug in the drive, we're back in business. And I'm going to go ahead and double check it and make sure everything's okay. And now we're going to hook up the device and make sure we're good to go. So I believe the thing to take away from this in summation is to work with what you have. That's what's in the box. If anything special you're going to need for tools, you're going to need a Phillips screwdriver number 2. You're going to need also a tip number 1. You're going to need a set of micro screwdrivers, both Phillips and straight blade. And then the last thing you're going to need is a set of wrenches, because we found out working with those standoffs, you got to have a 4.5 millimeter wrench. I'll put a link up to the tools I got. I went up to Lowe's and got a set of sockets to work with this. 4.5 millimeter. Wow. We've shown you working with the Endoscope, OtoScope, where you can see what the issue is, trying to get those in. So if you decide to put in more than one NVMe drive, you're going to need that special wrench. So beyond that, I think you should be pretty well good to go. If you guys have any questions, you know, the other deal we've got, now this we use for our sneaker network. but we have the ability to drop a 2.5-inch drive in this rack, or we can take the 2.5-inch drive in directly. Because we go from here to a different room, I like keeping them in this holder in an anti-static bag. That's how I transport them, because that right there is what you're seeing right here. So I think we pretty much covered all the bases. Again, this is all about the Gigabyte TRX40 Designare motherboard. And of the 14 motherboards on that chipset, this is the only one that has Thunderbolt 3 on it, and it works. We've shown it. 3 ways to do connectivity. We only did one. We connected a data device. Now, we have 3 audio interfaces we're going to be working with. One of those is USB 3, which I think will be a blast when you see it. We're going to get to it. But the other 2 are Thunderbolt 3. So we had to have Thunderbolt to use those audio interfaces. One of them is one that everyone keeps asking about. We're finally going to show it with this computer. The other one is one that I think also a lot of people will be interested in, not just because of the interface, but because of the software that works with it. I'll just say PreSonus and leave it at that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll look forward to seeing you next video. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thanks for watching. Thumbs up will be appreciated. Please subscribe. On to the next video, and we are out.